The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
September 28th, daylight. The monsters have taken over the internet. Somehow, we're still podcasting.
Man, if that's the thing that survives humanity, it's so screwed.
They'll go out entertained.
It's like literally, it's like tens of thousands of years of human endeavor has led to this. This is what distilled out. It's like, really, was it worth it? I don't know, man. It's not a good look. Not a good look for humanity.
Well, let's not do value judgments. I'm just saying this is what happened. All that's left is nostalgia goggles.
Well, I mean, yeah. So but then that makes us the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, right? So if that's true, then we can totally make judgment calls. Who cares? We're all that's left. But I guess we might as well think of ourselves as golden gods because, I mean, nobody's there to challenge us about it.
Yeah, agreed.
So,
I say it's a good thing.
Yeah, good. So we're on that. So what game did we play?
We played Resident Evil 3 : Nemesis. And that matters because they remade this game this year, which was one of the reasons it was on my mind. And it's just Resident Evil 3. So you get really angry people in your Twitch stream when they're like, this isn't Resident Evil 3. This is Nemesis. This is the original. Because, like, you have to tag your stream with the game you're playing, and I did it wrong. They were mad.
Good. Well, A, good. You deserve that. But B, I mean, like, if it's a nostalgia podcast, probably not playing something that came out this year. Although I could suggest, that we play this as, like, the compare and contrast, in which case I ended up immediately proving myself wrong. But no, I found out that this game was being remade because like we have the old copies of it, right? But sometimes I'll be like, do I want to bother booting up this old system and like trying to plug in the old hardware and all sorts of stuff, or can I just play a version of it on like my new PlayStation?
A virtual console, PSN, kind of,
because this way I don't have to sit as close to the TV. I can sit across the room, and I don't have to worry about my 2-year-old screaming across the room and just like yanking the controller out of my hand and then looking at me like I'm the asshole.
You are. You had a thing they want.
So I thought you were just going under the idea of like, I'm just always like,
but in this specific instance.
Yes, but both globally and specifically. But no, so I went on to the PlayStation store and I'm like, maybe. And I was like, Resident Evil 3. And it's like, oh, dude, you want to play Resident Evil 3? I'm like, I do. It's like $60. I'm like, that's a red flag. let me see some gameplay. No, this is probably not right. And so then when I would like...
And these graphics are great. PS1 was killing it.
Yeah, they were just knocking it out of the park. I mean, PS2 is garbage. like Kingdom Hearts my butt. But then also too, if I like tried to look up anything to like try to understand, not doing research, but like literally like how does this work? Or I'm not really sure I understand this, right? It's really difficult to find anything about that video game because the internet is flooded with the new games. So I don't know whether you did that to me on purpose, but
I mean, I wasn't trying to make your life harder. But I did, and I'm okay with it. So, yeah. I do want to point out that the remake for this came out earlier in 2020. We are recording this episode on September 12th of 2020, and this game was originally released on September 22nd of 1999. So the year of the, they re-released it this year on purpose because it's an anniversary and it came out, after the first and second were remade, but we're so close to the original release date that I think that's kind of a neat coincidence.
That is a neat coincidence. We always try to stay out of like current events because it's supposed to be an evergreen podcast, but apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic game coming out on April the 3rd, that's a little on the nose, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean,
like
anyone who had any projects that had anything to do with like disease and how it would impact society, they're all just like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God.
Like, is it okay? Like, how tastefully did we do this? Because if we played it, if this is like Gungeon but with disease, like this may not be culturally the way to go right now. Yeah, but I mean, like, to be fair, you know, sometimes you got to roll the dice, just like Street Fighter 2 in the USSR, man. Like, it's just, you know, who'd have thunk?
Yeah,
you know,
they're not to blame, or I don't think so.
Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory. But
do you have a nostalgia experience for this game? Because mine is very specific.
I certainly do not, because I was on the right side of the console wars.
Did you? Okay, so you were a Nintendo kid. I was. Did you have a GameCube eventually?
I did.
So did you play Resident Evil 4?
You know, I just never really got into the Resident Evil thing, just because zombie post-apocalypses, apocalypses, yeah. They were just never really my bag up until The Last of Us, which is very problematic for me playing Resident Evil 3, and we'll get into that.
Ooh, but another thing that came out this year.
Yep. This is true. No, I never really got into it, especially because by the time, like you said, by the time I could, it was on like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. And I was like, man, it was such a cerebral storyline. How in the world would I possibly follow it? One. But two is that, you know, the fan base on this tends to be pretty, I don't want to say rabid, because they're not like toxic or anything like that, but they're pretty dedicated. Like, a lot of people are like, have you played Resident Evil 3 or Resident Evil? I'm like, no. Why? And they're like, movies and a lot of backstory and lore. And I was just kind of like, I don't really, I'll just play, you know, Mario Kart.
Yeah, that's fair, because I think you're right to make fun of the shallowness of the story, in that you could absolutely chug through all of the games and never know what the hell is going on, because there's never really a point in any of the ones I've played, because I've not played anywhere close to all of them, but there's never really a point where it's like, oh, if you don't know that this guy's mother-in-law was cousins with this dude's grandson and that they went to the same school, and that's why, like, you never, it's shoot zombies in the face and don't let them eat you. Like, right. Knowing the lore is never required to success. And so there is an incredibly deep, ridiculously complicated Looney Tunes story behind all of this universe, but it doesn't matter.
So on a scale of Super Mario Brothers to Metal Gear Solid, where does Resident Evil?
I mean, if you're taking
Resident Evil,
if you're taking Resident Evil 3 at like that, if that was the whole canon, I would say it's like Super Mario World, but heading toward Metal Gear Solid. If you take all of Resident Evil, because now there's like 8 games and some spin-off side games and stuff, that's fully, I mean, they're roommates with Metal Gear Solid. Like it's that level of deep, nonsensical complexity, just because people like it. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's definitely, this is, why not a tangent this early? But no, I remember when, the new Star Wars came out, episode 7, right? Yeah, episode 7 came out. And that was when Disney was like, hey, all of the comics, all of the side stuff, none of it's canon, you know? And that caused quite the stir. And to me, it's just my personality type. I was talking to somebody and they're like, I can't believe that they would do that. They were all angry, and I'm way too lazy to be that angry most of the time. So I said, I was like, well, the fact that they're not canon doesn't mean that they cease to exist as art. You know, like, you can still enjoy these things even though it's not tied to a grander thing. You know, like, if all of a sudden they said Star Trek Next Generation isn't canon in Star Trek anymore, I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean that like I can't watch it anymore. It's not like George Lucas came in and added in a bunch of like CGI bunny rabbits in the background. You know, it's not that bad. But there are definitely people, and there's nothing wrong with it, who really love getting an in-depth knowledge of complex lore like that. That tickles the happiness portion of their brain. So there's absolutely a market for it. Not me, but it exists, and there's nothing wrong with it. So, but that's why a lot of times when people are like, have you played Resident Evil? I'm like, I don't know. This feels like a Metal Gear situation, and that's not bad. It's just not for me.
Yeah, no, that is legit because I, for similar reasons, ducked out around this time. I played a little bit of the fourth one, and I was just kind of like, you know what, I think I'm all right. And as we'll talk about if we ever get to the actual game, there are things that ended up benefiting me that I did not know when I abandoned the series. My entire nostalgia experience for this game can be summed up as I played this while sleeping over at a friend's house all night, just all of the night. And not in the way that one might think like, ooh, you played a spooky game at night. That's so spooky. No, because there's a side thing that you unlock that I will have a lot of words about later. But the important part of it is in that stupid little side mission, you get money when you complete the side mission faster and faster. And then you can save up the money. And then you can buy a rocket launcher with unlimited ammo that you start the game with. And this game stops being a horror game when you have a rocket launcher with unlimited ammo. So it creates this whole new game plus experience that is like obviously not the core aesthetic of the game, but it's also obviously a way like a 12-year-old really wants to play this game. So most of my memories of this game are actually not like that first, bone-chilling, nightmare-inducing experience. It's being like Rambo running around the streets of Raccoon City with an unlimited ammo rocket launcher. It's
the Game Genie experience, like it's
yes.
That sounds like Game Genie, but with a bunch of extra steps.
It is Game Genie with a bunch of extra steps, but in a way like that made it feel earned because it's like, no, I killed the zombies, I made the money, I bought the rocket launcher, I deserve this.
Yes, because the game afforded you you didn't have to it's like convincing somebody to do something you want them to do as opposed to opening up their brain and stitching it together and then closing it back up and be like, now do what I want you to do. And they're like, okay, it's one feels like you did it legitimately. The other one definitely feels like something you shouldn't have done.
Yeah. We do need to do a quick plug for promo stuff because we got some new lovely followers. A couple of folks reached out to us. One person who has been, let's say, strongly requesting a certain genre of game for a while. We're not going to play the exact game you asked for, but we are going to play a game in that genre real soon. So you'll see soon. It's it's not the next game. It's like 2 or 3 games away. It's soonish.
Ominous.
But yeah, so find us on the Twitters and the Twitches, and there's a little contact form on the website and Apple reviews and all that stuff because we actually care about that.
Yes, again, it's the thing that we wake up in the morning for. I mean, I know we both have families and social lives and jobs, but it's those Apple reviews. Need it.
Those are the things that fill the space between the podcast reviews and hearing from listeners. Otherwise, we would just be staring at the wall waiting for Twitter notifications.
Yes. Well, actually, so final tangent for now until the next one is that there's this old proverb where a teacher takes a bunch of rocks, they have a bunch of rocks and a bunch of, smaller rocks and then sand, right? So they put a bunch of rocks into a jar and they're and then they put the smaller rocks which all fill up the spaces and then the sand which fills up the smaller spaces, and they're you see, if you put the sand in first, you can't fit all the rocks in, so you have to put in the necessities and then the other necessities, and then when he was done, he just pours a beer in there which fills it up to the to the brim, and they're well, what's the beer represent? And he's that no matter how full life is, there's always room for a beer, so
I feel like I've been missing out on that last chapter.
So I say all that because I thought that you were going to say that the Apple podcast, the Apple reviews were the beer, but no, it's
yeah, they're the rocks.
The rocks. Family's the beer. So there you go.
We need to get off this before something catastrophic happens.
Yeah, because both of our families listen to this. No, but I feel like now that if we were to ever get nostalgia goggle shirts, we could totally have families the beer, and then you'd know a real fan. It's family is the beer. So visuals?
Yeah, visuals. So this is an early PS1 game or a mid PS. This is a mid life cycle PS1 game, and that means that it is just chock-a-block full of FMVs, and I think they actually look pretty okay, right? They're not amazing. Like you look at this and you're like, I know what time in history this roughly is, but there are a small enough number of FMVs. Most of the story stuff is delivered in engine. So there's a small enough number of them that they were able to make them look pretty good. Like if you imagine how horrifying the people looked in the original Toy Story, it's not that. They look the way the toys looked in the original Toy Story.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely liked the look of the FMVs. I felt that they looked really they were right on the hairy edge of the one side of the uncanny valley, right? So they're not like Polar Express where it's, right? So it's definitely like there is no part of me that at any point was like, is that real? Like, are those real people? Like, they're clearly not real people, but they're getting the point across, where it's like, here's what this, is supposed to be conveying and what it's supposed to be looking like. I think it's important too that they did do them as CGI FMVs and not actual FMVs, like IRL FMVs, right?
Which is what they did in Resident Evil 1.
Yeah, that's no bueno, right? Because like then it just brings into stark contrast even more so the difference between like how awful the game looks by comparison, right? So I think that they made the right choice to be like it's the way the game looked just on steroids, and then it comes back down, which is very similar to what Final Fantasy VII did and all that good stuff. I definitely liked that. I felt that. So this is kind of a visual thing, which is I felt that some of the when you're running around, the way this game has a static camera. Right. So that does two things. One thing that it does pretty well is it allows for them to build a horror aesthetic better because they know exactly how you're viewing the scene, which is clearly what they're attempting to do. Right. And so they're basically saying like, we're going to lock the camera in and say, this is what you can see. Right. Great. Love it. The way, and I don't know whether this got better or worse or whether this is just me being a crotchety old man, but sometimes like the camera angles that they picked were such that if I went the wrong direction for like 2 seconds, I would cut between 3 different camera cuts in like under half a second, to the point where it almost made me like a little motion sick a couple of times,
There are a few large rooms, and there's a couple times you're in fairly large open areas that have like big fences all the way around where that kind of thing can happen. And it's nauseating, and God help you if you get into a combat situation when the camera keeps being like, now we're over here, now we're over here, now we're over here. Right. It's not, I'm with you 100%. It's not good, but it's at least it's the exception, not the rule. Most of the time they pin you into a long hallway or into a small room so that the camera, that one space doesn't have multiple cameras.
Right. Where I actually ran into it the most was in like forks in like that long hallway, So like, if I was going straight down the long hallway, I was fine. But if I tweaked a little bit too much, like the game thought I was going to go down the side road, but I wasn't. I was just not handling the controls very well. It'd be like side view, forward view, side view, forward view. I was like, whoa. Let's see, everybody just relax. Everybody calm down. And so I'm going to be comparing this game a lot to The Last of Us. Is that fair? No. Am I going to do it anyway? Yes. Because that's my one other like really strong experience in this kind of genre of particularly zombie horror game. And I think that if we're going to say like, does it hold up as far as, what do they do in this game has borne out into like current day? It's kind of good to compare and contrast because I think that this game, normally I would say like, that those static camera angles, I'm like, that's the way to go because again, it forces you into viewing a certain way. What I feel that they have done nowadays is, instead just made it so that way they've done a better job building the environments. So that way it behooves you to only view the thing in a certain way. Right. So like they make it so that way, like, okay, you walk into the area, there's zombies everywhere. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hide near the smallest thing, like the closest thing, right? That closest thing is such that you can move the camera wherever you want, but there's really only one place you can put the camera that makes any sense, So it's a way to still give you the agency so you feel like you have a free roaming camera, but not actually forcibly locking you in and then getting some weird camera angle cuts. I don't think the PlayStation was even capable of that. So I think that this was the right choice. But yeah, it was definitely something that was jarring given what they're doing in modern day games.
Well, I would say I think that they could have technologically dialed the fidelity of the visuals down probably a lot and given you a free roaming camera. The reason they didn't do that is because, remember, you're playing with a DualShock controller, but the original controller didn't actually have analog sticks, right? So you didn't have a good way to control the camera, right? Yeah. So like even there were, I mean, Metal Gear Solid is a contemporary of this, and it also doesn't have a free roam camera, even though the environments are polygon rendered, and you could technically, right? Because you can like go into the first person view, and the world just rotates around, and you see everything from Snake's point of view. And you know, when you lay down and you crawl under stuff, the camera like shoots down. So it is technologically possible. I think they made the right choice, not just for the controller weirdness that because I mean, there's no C stick. Like, I don't know what you would have L and R maybe, like, you know, so they had to do something to give you camera control if they did. But I'm glad they didn't, because, and I've said this a million times, but like, I want a director's hand in the camera. Like if I don't have full 360 degree control, like Last of Us style, or, you know, any modern 3D game, then I don't want to have some control. Just take control away from me, and especially in a horror game, because this is one of those factors that they changed from this point on. So from Resident Evil 4 onward, you had a free roaming over the shoulder, like God of War, Devil May Cry style third person camera. And I didn't like it. I don't like it because when you give the player that kind of control, it asks the player to do things with the visual information differently. And at the risk of straying too much into mechanics, like, it's basically saying to the player, hey, we're not going to tell you what's visually important. We're going to communicate that, and then you have to judge, which means there's lots of jump scares. And I don't actually really like being scared. So in a game like this, when you enter a room and it's a super long shot down a hallway and there's a bunch of windows, it's like, oh, something's coming through those windows. So I can like brace up for it, right? And that's why they chose that camera angle. That's why they drew that room that way, because they want me to know dogs are coming, right? And then it's scary when they come out because the situation is tense, but it's not that I had no idea.
Well, I think that you're speaking to, and this is definitely straying into just genre stuff, but I think it's good stuff to talk about, which is that there is a difference between being startled and being scared, right? So fear is something that like you experience over time, right? And one of the things that's critical in a game like this is the tension and release cycle, right? So the idea is that like in your example, you know, you walk down the hallway, and you see the thing, you know, oh no, something's gonna come at me. Something's gonna come at me. It builds tension, builds tension, builds tension. Then the thing happens, and then that tension is released, you know, and now you build to the next thing, and tension and release, right? Being startled, right, is just, you know, you're just kind of walking around. It's like, boo. It's like, oh, okay. You know, so it doesn't like kind of build the horror quite as well. Which, you know, I appreciate. I do think that this game, and we'll get into it probably a little bit later, but this game, in my opinion, starts to, I think, because one of the big complaints about Resident Evil was it started as a horror series and then became an action series. And then I think in like Resident Evil 9 or something, one of the more recent ones.
I think 7 is the one that's credited with like going back to actual horror roots, because 5 or 6 is the one where after the game was released, every single review was like, did you send a white guy to a brown country to murder people? What were you thinking when you shipped this narrative? And they had to like massively backpedal, and they're like, no, it's just where the story takes place. It's just a coincidence that the only person who does any murdering, oh God, what were we thinking?
oh God. Like, you know, say it out loud. So one other thing I mean, there's lots of stuff to touch on. But so door loading screens is is kind of a thing with this series, right?
It's iconic.
It is, and I like it. I think because I think it's a really clever way to get around loading screens, right? Because that's what the game's doing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically there is absolutely no way the PlayStation would have just melted under the sheer size of like what of these maps, right? If it tried to load it all at the same time, right? So what it does is it loads very small areas, right? And then, when it needs to load a new area, as opposed to popping up a loading screen, it just gives you this door opening, and that gives it a chance to load the next area, right? One of the ways the games do this in modern times, which I didn't even know until somebody pointed out to me, I'm like, that is brilliant, which is that if at any time in a game you're squeezing through a small hallway, it's a loading screen, right? And I'm like, that's so smart, because I never knew. I wondered why like that happens so much in video games these days. Like, why am I constantly stuck under weird rubble or squeezing through narrow spaces? It's like, I just gotta load the next screen. I'm like, that's amazing. So this is the progenitor of that, and it's not overly clunky. It's not problematic, in my opinion, and like you said, it's iconic. So it became like a staple of the genre, and I think a good one. I think it was a good way for them to work around it.
The places. So assuming you don't get lost, right? Because enemies don't really respawn. So assuming you don't get brutally lost and you're not just wandering aimlessly, which you can sometimes because puzzles, but the doors also serve to build a lot of tension, because you're like, I don't know what's going to be on the other side of this door, right? And you can't listen at the door. You can't peek through the keyhole. Like, you got to open it. You got to open it and walk into the room. And the places that I think that gets a little silly is there's a few large spaces, particularly in the back half of the game, where there's like a grand staircase in the middle of this big open room. And the staircase functions like a loading door. So you step onto the bottom of the staircase and then everything goes black. And there's just this ghostly flight of stairs, and it goes footstep, footstep, footstep. And then all of a sudden you're at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, that's not as good.
They do it with ladders too, where it's like the heavy, like, ringing in the sewer metal noise. And it's like, no, this doesn't feel as cool as the doors.
No, that doesn't bear out. And I just imagine somebody's like, all right, we're going to do this door thing. Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good. It's like, yeah, and we're going to do a stairs too. Wait, what? And not just like stairs, like ladders. It's like, wait, no, that's not the same. It's just kind of like somebody being like, man, I'm going to put olives on a pizza. It's like, oh, that's so good, because it adds a little bit of salty and like a little bit of like that good texture. It's like, yeah. And I'm also going to add olives to cream cheese. And like, I don't think that would. And ice cream. And it's like, oh, wait, they're all milk products. It's like, no. Yes, but no. But I'm pretty happy with that scaling analogy. I came up with that off the top of my head.
No, that was good. And the next time I want to explain to someone why I don't like olives on pizza, most of the time I'm going to somehow steer it toward that.
Yeah, because you could definitely make a straw man argument out of that, where it's just like, I don't like olives on pizza. It's like, why? It's like, oh, well, are we just putting olives on everything? I mean, you probably like olives on cream cheese or milk, wouldn't you? It's like, I didn't say that. It's like, no, you would, because you said that you've gone on record saying you like olives on milk-based products. Have you not? It's like, well, I mean, kind of, but exactly. You're insane, sir.
That's why I'm terrified for when you retire from science and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go be a TV news pundit.
I think that though I'm not saying that won't happen, I'm just saying that the person doing that will not be me anymore.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really important to me with the visuals is a thing that's not in the visuals, which is the HUD. There's no HUD. There's no HUD of any kind ever. There's a map that you can, get to, and there's an item screen that you can get to, and you can see your health, and you can see like any of the notes or photographs or anything that you've picked up during the course of the game. You can go and like reread them. That's where you like change your weapon equip and everything, but that's a completely separate screen. Right? You don't LNR through your guns or anything like that. And one of the ways that manifests, or two of the important ways that manifests, is one, you never have any idea how much health you have beyond how messed up Jill looks, right?
Yep.
And it's mostly in how she moves. So if you're standing still and fighting, you really do not know how messed up Jill is, because when she holds a gun the exact same way, whether you have 1 hit point or 1,000 hit points. But when you run, the more hurt you get, you like hold your side and you kind of limp and like drag one of your legs behind you. And so that gives you some useful information. And you also have no idea how many bullets you have. Like there's zombies bearing down on me. Like, do I have a full magazine, or am I going to fire one shot and then do the longest reloading animation ever?
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. Both of those things. I think that they serve the horror aesthetic well, especially, where, because you're not like card counting. You're not sitting there like, I have 78 bullets in this magazine, and then you're just kind of counting them as they fire off. So it does put you into some odd situations. And yeah, I liked the idea of, I didn't know how messed up Jill was until, like all of a sudden, like she was holding her side and I was like, ooh, she's not doing great. Should probably do something about that, And I think that kind of speaks to, I like the fact that when you hold the gun, it always looks the same, because to me, that kind of put me more into it as far as, when you're in a very intense situation, right? You don't really feel your injuries as much as then when you get out of the intense situation, you're like, oh no, I'm dying. Like the thing that pops to mind was that one time you and I were sparring and you brought that axe kick down across my face. And like, I didn't break stride. I just kept coming at you. And then like when we were at the water cooler later, you were like, dude, what happened to your face? I was like, you
happened to my face.
But yeah, I mean, like I definitely felt it afterwards, but in the moment I was just like, no, man, we're sparring. Right. So that to me kind of the feel that I got playing Jill related to that, because when I was firing a gun, I didn't feel any of my injuries. I was just trying to survive. But then the minute I stopped firing my gun, I'm like, oh, wait, no, I'm kind of bleeding from a lot of places I should not be normally bleeding from.
Well, and this is also, I think, importantly, kind of like narratively fits, which is, they don't really make a huge deal about Jill's backstory through most of this game. I mean, they don't hide it, but they're not shoving in your face like she's a special ops stars soldier, right? Like that's what she does, but they're not like dragging your face through it constantly. But if you know that about her, right? If you know like, oh, she's like special ops, she's this, super badass who is heavily trained in military operations and has dealt with zombies before. Like this is not her first zombie rodeo, right? She's also the star of the first two games, I think. Definitely the first one, but I think also the second one. Maybe doesn't matter. Anyway, like this is it's believable that when she is fighting for her life, she would not be panicking and babying her injuries, not because she's not hurt, but because she knows that concentrating on the threat would make her more likely to survive. So I think they just didn't want to have like 20 different firing a pistol animations. Like that's probably also a big part of it, but it does narratively fit. And it does kind of thematically fit, which is, it's nice when the path of least resistance also, you're like, we're not just being lazy about this. This fits.
Yep. The two, so there's one thing that I want to mention. I have two throwaway things. So one thing that I think is kind of cool is stuff that you can interact with is colored more vibrantly than stuff you cannot interact with.
Most of the time.
Most of the time, yes. But like when I was walking through and I saw herbs, I was very clear like, oh, that's a thing I can go pick up. It did draw the eye. The reason why I was able to do that was because of throwaway note number one. Gritty textures are gritty. They definitely shouldered into the PlayStation's gritty texture theming, but unlike Jumpin' Jack Flash or whatever, what was that? Jumpin'
Flash. Jumpin' Jack Flash is a thing, but it's not that thing.
Right. So unlike that game where you're a cartoon rabbit that is like in the grittiest sandpaper universe that ever existed, it makes sense here. I do think that they this was like a little bit the 5-year-old who makes dessert kind of a thing where they're like all the candy, so it's like yeah, or Homer when he comes up and he's like, yeah, I'll just take this sprinkled donut. And it's like, yeah, sure. What? You have clearly taken items from the candy shelf and tried to pass them off as sprinkles. And Mounds Bar, it's not the sprinkle. A Jolly Rancher, it's not the sprinkle. So I do feel that it was a little grittier than it probably needed to be, but not so overboard that I was like, this is disgusting.
Well, and again, it fits thematically, so your tolerance for it fits. Whereas, Jumping Flash, you're like, no, why? Why does everything look like it's made out of glitter sandpaper?
And the one other throwaway note that I have in visuals, because this is normally where we touch on it, is the hitbox for the shotgun is bananas, man. Like, I walked in, I swear to God, I fired that shotgun in front of me and a zombie behind me's head blew off. I mean, like, it's just, and it's not that bad, but they take AoE to a whole nother level, which I wasn't that skilled playing this game, so I was kind of okay with it. But yeah, there was definitely, I think that the hitbox is closer to 180 than it is to 90 degrees.
It's pretty generous, which I appreciate, because I'm not like a Resident Evil superhero. But the thing about the shotgun in particular is you can aim up and you can aim down. Mm-hmm. And when you aim down, it's because sometimes zombies are like crawling on the ground, and then later there's like the crawly snake things, and like there's some low enemies. It's not often that you need to aim up. I almost feel like they included that because they were like, well, I mean, because she has shoulders, so she can point the gun up in the air. Because there's crows that like, or ravens, something. There's birds. There's macaws that like fly around and try to like peck your eyes out, but you don't shoot at them, right? It's not like The Legend of Zelda where you kill every bat in the search of delicious rupees. Like you just run away from the birds. And there's only a couple times in the whole game where you are on a lower level and something is up higher than you. So the reason I say all that is like, you can't headshot, but when you point a gun straight up in the air, it still sort of acts like you're shooting straight if they're close enough to you. And with the shotgun, close enough doesn't have to be all that close. So like, you want to see some zany visuals, like just spin around in a circle with the shotgun pointed up in the air and be amazed at how many things you successfully kill that are on the ground.
Absolutely. And just so you know, ravens differ from crows in appearance by their larger bill, tail shape, flight pattern, and their large size. Ravens are as big as red-tailed hawks, which means that there were definitely ravens in this game, not crows.
Thank you.
So just say, I mean, obviously, you know, I definitely wasn't Googling that while you were talking.
Not at all. No. The only other thing I have to say for visuals, I already said, but I want to reemphasize like how important to me the director's hand in the camera is. Like there were probably half a dozen other episodes or more where I have referred to the camera in Resident Evil as being the way I prefer the camera's done if you're not going to give me free control. So now that we've actually played a Resident Evil game, I just want to emphasize, like, I lived it. It is as good as I remembered. Like, I really, really wanted that. Just tell me what to look at. Like, right. Either tell me what's important or misdirect me on purpose, but don't leave me constantly being like, what's over there? What's over there? Oh God, what's behind me? Like, I don't want to do that. And I admit part of that is because I don't really like horror. And so this allows me to brace up when I need to and not brace up when I don't need to. But there's several times across the first 3 games where like you go down a hallway and the camera's in one spot, and then you do something, you finish a puzzle or you talk to a person or whatever. And then when you go back into that room, now the camera's at a different spot in the hallway. And that matters because these are hand-drawn static JPEG backgrounds, right? These are not 3D rendered polygons, which means it was so important to them that you be looking this other way that they drew an entire additional representation of that room or that hallway or that outdoor space or whatever. So like, I really appreciate that. I think it makes the tense moments appropriately more tense. I think it makes the moments you don't really need to worry about, because like in the save rooms, like you can always see the entire space, including all 4 walls. So you know, like nothing's going to sneak up on you. So it's like, I like it. I wish modern games would sometimes go back to this well. Like I get that it's trivial to have a free roaming camera, but like, come on, like tell me what to look at sometimes.
Legit. Audio.
And actually, I'm going to just railroad you in case you had something you wanted to say about audio, because I was just talking about save rooms. And one of the cool things that the save rooms do is they have like a little melody, because most of the game doesn't really have music, but the save rooms have save room music, right? Like a little kind of haunting melody. And that tells you when you hear that music that you are safe. You never, ever get attacked by anything. Nothing ever goes wrong when you can hear the save room music, which at the very end of the game, they used to screw with the player, because after like 8 hours of that being true, you're in a room that is a save room, and then you go back to that room later and the music doesn't play and something terrible happens. And
dun, dun, dun.
No, not dun, dun, dun. No music. Weren't you listening?
What?
but I thought that was, it's really a smart way to communicate to the player. Like, this music means you're safe. If you hear this music, it means you're safe. And then for them to give you the visual of what had previously been a safe space, but to take away that additional cue creates this very subtle, unsettling, like, but wait, this was a save room before. And it's like, yeah, no, you could still save in here, but there's zombies because there's no anti-zombie music, which is, I guess, what that is. But it's like, I thought that was like a really subtle, really clever way to just be like, this is because it's not comfortable music, right? It's not a happy tune, but it's like when you hear this little melody, you're not going to get attacked by zombies. You can put the controller down, you go to the bathroom, make yourself a sandwich. You are fine as long as this music is playing.
Yes. So I'm a little bit upset with Jill just because she didn't recognize that this is anti-zombie music and just get onto the Raccoon City loudspeakers and just blare that out, you know? Like you said, there's not a whole lot of music, anything like that. I found the zombie noises intolerable. Did not like. They were literally, the note that I have is awful and repetitive. To me, they pulled me out of the game, you know, in the sense of like, you know, it's supposed to be like this horror game, right? So it's all spooky, scary. And then the fact that you have like zombies going like, what I mean, like, it's the same like 4 or 5 noises like every time, you know? And again, you know, I know they're working with limited space and limited resources. Like, I get that, but like,
no, they do not get a pass. The voice acting across the board is just absolute garbage. Every spoken word out of every character's mouth, zombies included, is garbage. The one and only spoken line of dialogue that is convincing is Nemesis going stars, because he actually sounds super angry. Everything else is just like, is this your second day of theater class? Like, what is happening?
Yes. Yeah. No, it was closer in line to me. The thing it honestly reminded me of was the Minecraft zombie, which was
the creepers. Oh no, you mean in the Underdark or whatever?
Yeah, the actual zombies, Minecraft zombies. Yeah. And I know about Minecraft zombies because one time I decided to build a sky palace in Minecraft, which not thinking, because I was building like Kami's Lookout, right? And not thinking that blots out the sun on the surface world, which is how you spawn mobs and bad guys. So that means that I created inadvertently a hell on earth, like Raccoon City, by trying to create heaven. And that felt weirdly balanced to me. But that being said, is that like, that's what it was, because, you know, like you get used to walking around and you're like that, and you're like, oh no, zombies, right? So it did do the thing it's supposed to do, which is that when I heard that noise, I knew there were zombies, but it very much so was like a video game cue where it's like, when I hear this noise, I need to go deal with zombies, not, oh no, it's spooky, scary now, you know? And yeah, the voice acting is just, it's trash. I mean, like on a scale of The Last of Us being on the high end all the way down to Symphony of the Night, you know, like, this one's roommates with Symphony of the Night, you know?
I mean, I'd say that voice acting in Symphony of the Night is better than this. Not a lot, but like I would put, if those are the extreme points of the scale, I would say this is lower.
It's like, dude, that's not fair. Symphony of the Night's better than this. Yeah, I mean, like, to be fair, the voice acting's not bad. It's I guess, like, if you took voice acting and dialogue and threw them into a soup, you know, and like mix them together, because it's like what is a man, you know, like that.
But that's a stupid line, but it's performed really well. Whereas, wait, don't open that door from the first game. And oh god, what does Carlos say? Oh no, it's right in the beginning. There's the guy who like he's just some random like business guy, and his daughter just got eaten, and him and Jill like escape into that little warehouse. And
yes,
he just the way that dude just barks and screams at you is like, I get it. Like his psyche has just completely shattered. This poor man, like his family just died. Like he's completely lost his grip on reality. You find out later, if you go back to that spot, that like he had like a hand in some of this. So like he feels personally responsible. And it's like, Yeah, wow, that's incredible. Who are we going to get to do the voice? Oh, I don't know, just that guy over there. Does he work here? I don't know. Just give him $20. And it's like, you know, I'm not a professional voice actor, but that's also why I haven't been paid to be a professional voice actor in anything. Like I think it's reasonable to say of all the things in the game, like voice acting, and this is true for the first 3 entire games, right? They didn't get even decent voice acting until 4 and beyond. Like, it's just bad. It's bad. It's so bad. It's really ridiculously experience questioning bad.
Well, and this is a good time as any. So I know how much you have left for audio. But this is a good time for me to shoe in my new segment called Ludonarrative Dissonance. So
this one's
you got something else for?
Is that going to be linked in the chapter art? No, I do have one other important thing about the audio, because this is actually related to the music with the save room, right? Is there are 2 other ways that they use music to communicate useful information. When you are just walking around, there is a kind of soundtrack, right? It's not a song. It's like trash cans falling over, people screaming in the distance, right? It's the, you know, if you bought this CD on the Home Shopping Network, it would be like, you know, sounds of a destroyed city, right? Music of the apocalypse. And it's just, in fact, I take it back. That's a Simpsons reference. And I didn't even mean to, where they sell, it's one of the Halloween Horror Nights, or the Treehouse of Horror episodes where they sell an album of like zombies. I will find this and share it with you after the recording. It's noise, right? It's not music, but it's played on the music layer of the audio. So other sounds can be going on because that's not save room music. It's walking around the city music. And it's annoying because they chose to include banging and like an orchestra hit, like that dun, like occasionally spread out by like many, many seconds of near silence. And so you never get total peace and quiet. If you have gone everywhere in the map, if you have killed every single zombie and you're just standing in the middle of the street, you can still hear zombies way off in the distance that will never come. And I absolutely understand that is an intentional choice, and that is how they want me to feel. But if you screw up some of the puzzles like I did, and you're wandering around aimlessly for a little while like I was, eventually you're like, I know there's no zombies here. Stop making me think there's zombies here. So like that created like a little bit of a player frustration. It's not really the game's fault. It's my inability to have more quickly solved the puzzles. Nemesis also gets special music. And so when he is chasing you, there's music playing as long as he's chasing you. And what I think is hilarious is, just like Jill does not use the anti-zombie music from the save rooms, Nemesis apparently literally has like a boombox playing his threatening music, because when you are in the same room as him, the music is at full volume. When you're 1 room away, it's ducked. When you're 2 rooms away, it's really ducked. And then once he stops chasing you, it goes away entirely. And I think it's really considerate of him to play like his Chariots of Fire, like Here I Come.
It's stereo. It's Stelio Cantos.
Yeah.
It's the Stelio Cantos, Stelio. You know, like
that's considerate of him to like give you a heads up, like, hey, I'm coming.
Yep. Well, because he wants you to know. Like, he doesn't want it to be a surprise. Like, he wants you to know.
Yeah. I don't have to sneak up on you like those poor voice acting zombies.
Exactly. Ludonarrative dissonance time?
Yeah, which I guess for consistency's sake, here is where I'll put the chapter marker for controls and mechanics, because this can't possibly be audio, can it?
No.
All right. You get your bonus segment, sir.
Woo! Okay, so for those who, you know, don't know, ludonarrative dissonance is something in video games where basically it's the difference between the way the game plays and the way what the narrative is saying is going on. So the idea that, you know, one of the ones that's called out for it all the time is that the other Naughty Dog game. I forget what it's not Far Cry.
Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah, that's it. So that's one of the issues with Crash Bandicoot. No, but it's that the idea is that if you're the hero of the adventure, right, and so you're going around trying to hero
you think
yourself
of Uncharted?
You got it. Yep. So if you're, Nathan Drake and you're kind of going around trying to be this like roguelike hero and you're murdering hundreds of people in the process, you're not the hero. You're a serial killer. I mean, like, and the thing is, he's not a soldier, and even then it's like, okay, I'm a soldier, but I am apparently the biggest soldier that ever soldiered because I am all the army needs. I mean, like another example would kind of be like Dynasty Warriors. But even in that, where you're taking out like thousands of soldiers for your one guy, like that's supposed to be kind of the point, is it's like you're the hero of the adventure. But even then, so that's ludonarrative dissonance, right? There were a lot of things in this game where I felt that the narrative was telling me one thing, and then another thing like was kind of going on. So the first example I had of it where I was like, ooh, I think this is going to be a thing, is that so this is a puzzle game, right? But it's taking place in kind of a post like in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, right? So and the puzzles aren't how to get through the zombies, right? So in The Last of Us, the puzzles are the zombies, right? There's a room filled with zombies and you got to get from point A to point B, and it is a puzzle, right? In this one, literally in the first few minutes, like you walk out, right? You hop over the dumpster, which great gating mechanic, to make sure that you know how to hop over stuff. Cool, love it. And then all of a sudden, all the zombies coming at you, and you go through the door, and then you just kind of hang out. Like it does, all of the tension drops away, right? As you're just kind of like, oh, I guess the zombies are no longer outside. And the reason why I know they're no longer outside is because I believe there are windows on that wall, like, so it's like, why all of a sudden do I now have all of the time in the world to calmly explore this space, when there are theoretically zombies like plowing through the walls? You're able, you're able to open your crafting menu in the middle of battle, so like zombies can be like pouring at you. You're like, yeah. I got to make bullets to shoot you with.
I got to mix some herbs. If you could just be cool, so I
I'm
can
about to chill.
Yeah.
I can light this bad boy. Yeah. So I mean, and again, so it's just kind of weird to be like, oh no, everything's coming in on me. Wait. It's like having the Saved by the Bell timeout.
Did he say timeout? Was that it, or was it freeze?
Yeah. I think it was timeout.
I think it was timeout.
Yeah, where you'd be like, and literally, because I've watched way too much, not of the show, of critiques of the show, where people have said like, no, he's kind of a god because he can time people out and then interact with them and then time them back in. So it's not that bad, but it's still, it's a little, again, it pulls you out of the narrative. Whereas again, unfair to compare it to The Last of Us, but in The Last of Us, if you want to craft stuff, there's no pause menu to deal with that. Like you're dealing with that. You're desperately trying to like craft a gun as like people are slowly walking up to you trying to kill you, Yeah.
And I think not nearly to The Last of Us complexity, but they could have chosen to make you do some of that stuff in real time in combat with the controls available to you on the original PS1 controller. I think they massively overcorrected in saying like, you know what? If you're in a situation where you're not comfortable, if you're dying, we're not going to make you heal in combat. You heal in this pause menu where you can take all the time you need. If you've got the stupid little ammo maker, which is one of the worst features in any video game ever, and I hate it, then you can, hey man, craft some bullets. It's okay. Don't worry. We're not going to let you run out of bullets. You got gunpowder. It's fine. Right? Like it feels intentional that they gave you the ability to just pause and set the controller down and just be like, oh man, I'm so scared. It's so intense, but it sucks too much of the tension out because it gives you a Zack-like, godlike power to pause time, but then still do things.
Right. And so part of the reason why I think they put that in is because of the save mechanic, right? Which is they give you basically limited saves, right? And I get that as being like a tension builder because the idea is that you can't just save scum, because if you're constantly save scumming, then that's a problem, right? But then that does mean that they have to ratchet back the difficulty, right? So like you have to be able to be like, no, wait, let me craft some herbs as opposed to, oh no, I made a mistake and now it's punted me back to like the last time I used a save ribbon, which is again, so you can't make the game have those like weird difficulty spikes if you have wildly increased your cycle time, which they did. Two other things is that the zombies the way the zombies themselves kind of worked, I didn't care for it, in the sense that I didn't find the zombies wildly threatening. I found them more as a nuisance, and so if that's the main thing that's like driving the horror of the game, right? Like, is it like, oh no, zombies are coming to get you? Is it like every time I saw a zombie, I'm like, oh, this has just blunted my forward momentum slightly? Whereas if you compare that to, say, clickers in The Last of Us, right? It doesn't matter how much health you have. When you see a clicker, you're going to take that seriously, because it will one-shot you if you let it get too close to you, So like they're serious. Whereas the other things, if they get too close to you, it's going to be a problem, but it's going to be a big problem. So you've really got to like think about what you're doing. Especially these zombies, while they're making their terrible like sound, like as they're slowly coming towards you. I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. Blam, 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 blam. All right, now go back, craft some more ammo. Okay, moving on. So right.
Did you if all of a sudden, did you play on easy or hard?
I definitely played on easy.
Okay, well, I ask because on hard, you have not only less ammo total, but you also have a smaller inventory. So I think this is someplace where, because I also played on easy, no question, but I think this is somewhere that they again kind of overcompensated, because they're like, oh, well, some people are going to want to play this and they're not that good at the game. And it's like, yeah, but on easy, you never run out of anything ever. You never choose to run through a room and leave the zombies alive because you're afraid you'll run out of ammo. You kill every single zombie you see. You never use the knife because you're trying to save bullets. You shoot every single zombie you see in the face until it stops zombieing at you. So like that ratchets down the tension like too much, too like the bosses are still a major threat. You can still absolutely die. And in the end game, there's some regular enemies that will absolutely murder you in like one or two shots. But the regular zombies, ostensibly the main threat in the universe, are not.
Right. And so when you see, the horror on Jill's face as she's, like kind of like running, ducking, weaving in the cutscenes, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm like, why? It's very much so the ludonarrative dissonance of Aerith dying to Sephiroth, and you're like, I've got Phoenix now. Like, is this an issue? Like, I have the ability. I've got the Dragon Balls here. Like, they're ready to go. So that, and so basically, like, all of that kind of comes together into the fact of like, if the main thing that is supposed to be horror inducing, scary, right, is not, I am more than well enough equipped to deal with it, right? And even on even on hard mode, like even though you may run out of ammo and stuff like that, it's more of a, how do I duck weave in a way that I can get around this? To me, I feel like this is, and maybe I'm wrong, but like where they started to kind of inch more towards action, because the zombies are representative of an action game where there's just a whole bunch of targets for you to shoot down, which is it would be fine as an action game. So I feel like that in some ways the game is like, it's the cutscenes are about being a horror game, but then the gameplay is closer to puzzle action game, and that kind of causes some chafing between those two things. So
yeah, and I think you can see that the people working on the game, assuming it was some of the same people over the many, many years the franchise has been running, but they were feeling this out at this time, right? They were like, well, what makes a good horror game? What makes a good action-y game? And where do we want to thread that needle? And they started to go more and more and more towards action game that happened to take place in the zombie apocalypse. And then they made their massive course correction, right? Where they were like, no. Actually, we do want this to be a horror game. That's what this universe is supposed to be. And I've seen just clips from the most recent couple of games, and I know they're not for me. I'm just like, no, like if this is what they felt comfortable putting in the trailer, there is no way this game is for me. Whereas Resident Evil 3, like I was startled. There were a bunch of times where I was like, and then I, fired a bunch of shots and then everything was fine. But there's very few times that I would say I was ever scared. Right. And I'm, again, as the player, I'm super fine with that. But like their audience, I think, was like, oh, hey, I'm kind of like a giant bicep superhero who can't be stopped. I don't really feel that threatened. And then, they kind of brought it back. But that
I'm not Ridley. I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right. This isn't Alien. This is Predator.
Yeah.
And the one final thing I'll say about it is that, to me, this kind of, and again, it was indicative of the time in history. I mean, we're going 3D, we're doing all this different sort of stuff. It was experimental, and we have way better idea of how to make video games now than we did back in the day. That somebody should make a podcast about it. But to me, this looks like the Ocarina of Time of this series, right? Where, in the sense of like, before it was like horror, and then they said like, oh, well, let's add this other stuff in, and you're like, okay, you're kind of starting to become more of an action game. You're starting to lose what you were, right? And then they're like, oh, well, let's do more of that and more of that and more of that, until eventually, you've got Skyward Sword, right? Which is kind of like, it's just an action game now, in the same way that, like Zelda used to be about exploration, and now it's about like being locked into this like paint by colors narrative, right? It's like, and then all of a sudden they said like, okay, Resident Evil 7 was like their what was the new one again?
The most recent Resident Evil?
No, the most recent Zelda game.
Oh,
for the Switch.
Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, so then like Resident Evil 7 was like Breath of the Wild, where they're like, nope, bring it back, So I feel like that it's weird to say that Resident Evil is a lot like The Legend of Zelda, but I feel that the series have gone through similar kind of stints, and this to me feels a lot like Ocarina, where it's still very fun, and it still does have a lot of the horror aesthetic. In the same way that in Ocarina, there's still tons of stuff to explore and still tons of stuff to do. But they kind of started to lock you into this thing, and then you can kind of see like, oh no, this is where they got a lot of the ideas that they decided to hone in on that eventually became antithetical to the series.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% in agreement with you. We do need to talk about the swan song that this game has, which is tank controls. This is the last game that has tank controls.
It's terrible, dude. I hate it. I hate it so much.
So much. Okay. So I may or may not remember to link this particular Twitch clip in the show notes, but if you go and find me on Twitch, there is a clip of me having this revelation live on camera and being super sad about it, which is modern games do not have controls like this, right? And they're called tank controls because it's how you drive a tank, right? Like,
oh, I thought it was because it's how you tank a game.
Well done.
Thank you.
It's how you tank a franchise. So there's one of those forks that you were talking about, right? Where it was like a flux capacitor Y shape, where it goes and it splits in two directions at like 45-degree angle. And Nemesis attacks you at this, like when the 20th time you go through this intersection, Nemesis shows up, and somebody who was watching on stream was like, wait, so how are you like negotiating this interaction? Because like I eventually like beat him down, but the camera kept freaking out because we were near the center of the fork, right? Exactly what you were describing. And it was nauseating, exactly like what you were describing. And so I beat Nemesis down, and then I'm like reading through the chat, and they're like, how does walking even work in this mess? And I was like, oh, well, like it up is like forward, and then, left and right turns you, and back makes you back up. And they were like, well, but the camera goes 180 degrees when you go from, the extreme end of this fork to the other end of this fork. So like, are you sliding your hand down to the other button? And I was like, no, because like up is always Jill's forward and then left and right. So it doesn't matter which way that's why the controls are like this. That's why the controls are like this. It's because then it doesn't matter where the camera is. I'm always using up to be Jill's forward, and left is always Jill's left. And it doesn't matter what the camera's doing. Oh no. Because I went into this with fond memories of tank controls, right? Like, oh God, no analog sticks. This is going to be such a chore. And, everybody who knows anything about the series, like from this time in history, knows tank controls and how it's this like big, jerk off screw you to how old video games were made. And it just, the crushing wave of like, they did this on purpose for a good reason. Just like, no, I don't want to face reality.
I don't like this.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's fun. I'm not saying that it's like, it makes navigating like a joy, but they did do it on purpose and for a good reason. And so you're still absolutely free to hate it. Lord knows I don't love it, but I was like forced to accept like, this was not a bad decision. They made this decision for a good reason, and I just have to now live with that.
It's kind of like, when all of a sudden I walk into the room and Teddy has shoved Lizzie off of a chair and she's now on the ground crying. I'm like, why would you ever do that? And like, he like points to the counter and there's like scissors on the counter that she was about to get to. And I'm like, damn it. Still, like, I don't like this, but you did do it for a good reason. Yeah.
Tank controls are the toddler about to grab scissors of video game controls.
Of video games, yeah. Where it's just the 5-year-old intervention to toddler going to grab scissors. Yes. So all that being said, I did that touched on my note of movement's unintuitive. You walk in this game unbearably slowly. Like, just walking and that's in and of itself fine. But this is where I got to ask you, because I couldn't find an instance of this, but maybe I'm just unobservant, troglodyte. There's no noise mechanic in this, by which I say that there's no like sneaking.
You mean like if you're running, it alerts zombies, that kind of thing, because it's like heavier footfalls.
Correct. Yeah.
I do not think so, because
I couldn't.
All of the
zombies pop out at you regardless of whether you're running, walking, climbing trees.
Well, and all of the combat encounters are specifically designed, right? It's never that you're trying to sneak past zombies. You can run past them, but you're never really trying to sneak past them. And I'm pretty sure it's established in universe that these zombies like seek out living flesh, right? The way like in a lot of the way like in a lot of horror movies, it's like, they can smell like, a warm-blooded like living person, and that's why zombies don't eat other zombies, because they can tell the difference between a dead person and a live person. So it's I don't know how much detail they go into or like where the boundaries are on that, but it's established in universe that like even if you were just quietly sneaking past, like they would have zombie ways of detecting you, right? So I don't think this game includes a noise mechanic, probably for like lots of reasons, but it's even established in universe that's not how these zombies find people,
which is entirely legitimate. Again, that is pushing it further towards an action franchise.
Totally.
But that being said, is that if there is no noise mechanic, why do you walk so unbearably slowly? Right? Like just crank up. Because again, I could see wanting to make a difference between walking and running, because in a puzzle game, if you're trying to interact with the environment in a nuanced way and you like push right or push forward like ever so slightly and you jump like 5 feet forward because that's just how fast you run, like I could see that being frustrating. But like you walk like bananas slowly. I'm like, you're never sneaking around. There's no reason for you to be able to walk this slowly. So like, bring my walk animation like up 50%, so I'm just walking a little bit faster, because basically I never walked in this game at all. I was always running. And so if I'm always running, why is that something that requires an additional button interaction?
Or do the opposite, run by default with a walk button.
Yeah, exactly, which is what The Last of Us basically does, where it's just, you naturally move quickly, and then and they actually do both, where there's a run button and a move way the hell more slowly button. They sneak, like when you're sneaking around, like when you're crouched, and then there's a move even slower when you're doing the military walk, right? So there's, but on a scale of 1 to 4, you're naturally a 3, right? So yeah, just like I said, like when I was like, oh my God, you walk so slowly, maybe you got to sneak around. Nope. Okay, then I don't know why you're walking so slowly.
Yeah, which is like, this is, I know ideally, like when we replay a game, it's like when we both played, but I do get some enjoyment out of the games one of us have played or has like more detailed memories of, because I knew there was no sneaking. So like that, I never walked anywhere ever. I'm just always holding the run button because I know I'm not sneaking anywhere. So like I was aware of it, but it had become like a low level, like just hold the run button, right? Like my brain had filed that away as don't even consider walking. Whereas your brain was like, I walk by default do I need to walk? And the answer is no.
Nope. It's the Mega Man charge equivalent, right? Like why wouldn't you be charging? Like you're always have that button down, you know?
Always be charging.
Always be charging. Always be running.
You mentioned the puzzles, and we also talked a little bit about the inventory. And which one of those things annoyed you more? Because I want to make sure, I'd love to get to both, but I want to make sure we do justice to whichever one was worse.
I didn't like the puzzles more. I felt that the inventory, just to touch on it, like the inventory was like fine. Having a small inventory, I'm like, okay, I get it. You can only carry so much stuff. And crafting, it's fine, you know. But yeah, the puzzles, I feel that we should speak on because it's more having a puzzle game in a horror. And again, where the zombies aren't the puzzle is weird. Like it's very disjointed. So I'd like to talk about it. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think the inventory is more of just a gigantic chore. Like it's just a huge clicky chore. The problem with the puzzles, and sidebar to this, how are we going to finish the episode discussion? I actually knew what ludonarrative dissonance was. And I was just waiting. I was just waiting for you to set up the like, oh, do you want to explain to the audience? Because I could have said yes.
That's the thing, though, is I knew you knew at that time. So I was like, no, he already knows this. So
yeah, it was a total Skinner box. I was like, yeah, I've got it this time. But then, like the light didn't turn on.
Because you see, that's the thing, Lions, is that this is the horror game. That's the big reveal, right? Is it you were like, play Resident Evil 3? I'm like, okay, but now I've got to set up a huge horror experience for Lions. So for the last like 4 or 5 episodes, I've been building this thing into the episodes to like slowly train you to do this one thing. And now, bam, that's the big reveal.
It's the Twilight Zone with the glasses in the library. Like, no, I knew this time. I mean, I always know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No,
I was prepared to speak to it. Yeah. But so for me, the puzzles are the big dissonance moment, right? Because I'm the action hero stuff and the terrible voice acting, like those do also suck you out of the horror aesthetic a lot. But to me, the experience ruiner, by which I mean the horror experience, right? Not that it ruins the game, but like the right. thing that ruins the horror experience is the puzzles for a lot of reasons. For one thing, they make no goddamn sense. Like, no sense. They don't even attempt to make them make sense. It's like they designed a puzzle and then they slap a coat of paint on it to make it fit into the world. And no one ever stops to ask if this makes any kind of like logical sense. Like, why would this statue exist where you take the book off the statue and then you put it into the town square against this fountain, and then you take away I think it's a compass, and then you put the compass, these are all giant stone tablets, by the way, that are huge. And then you take
it fit nicely into your inventory.
Yeah, that fits easily into your tube top and pencil skirt. So, to be fair, she was at the movies when the zombie outbreak happened. She wasn't at work.
Sorry, I'm just picturing Francine doing her shoplifting carry. You know, so she's just like carrying these cubes around.
Yeah, basically.
Anyway,
so yeah. you take the stone thing and you put it, and it makes the statue turn around so that you can get the battery out of the back of the statue. Why does the statue have a battery? Why is the statue programmed to interact with this other public art installation on the other side of town? Why couldn't you just walk around to the back of the statue? It's not up against a wall. It's actually notably in the middle of an open space where you have to deal with a combat encounter. Like, there's a gate you unlock by putting gems into a clock face, and it's in front of the police station. Why does the gate to the police station lock via gem clock? Like, it's just on and on and on and on. There's like, sometimes you got to find a key. Sometimes you need to figure out a password to interact with a computer. In the back half of the game, there's a lot of like, I don't know what the name for this kind of puzzle is, but it's like there's 6 knobs and you got to turn the knobs in the right order. Like, so you turn 1, then 3, then 4, then 2, right? So it's like, there's a lot of that kind of puzzle in the back half of the game. And those are at least like, you're supposed to be operating machinery and that's whatever. But gems and clock faces and statues and what? Like what?
Yeah. No, you guys would eat my lunch if I ever put any of that into a D&D adventure.
Oh, be
like, can you imagine?
Absolutely furious.
Yeah, like if I said like, okay, you guys need to like figure out how to open this door, and I can hear it now. It's like, okay, well, okay, like I try to pick the lock, I try to do this. It's like, no, none of that works. And then like you guys spend hours looking into it. And it's just like, no, you see, remember those gems you picked up in like the second town over? That's what operates it. You would just probably stare at me and be like, George, come on, man, like you gotta drink less. This is a problem. This is a real problem.
Yeah, it's just the whole. I mean, like, if any of them fit into the world, right? Like, if you were, because in the first game, you're in this mansion in the middle of like nowhere, and you're the person who owned it is insane, and they're working with the Umbrella Corporation, and they're insane, and so things are like hidden behind false bookcases, and it's like, oh, there's a key hidden in this statue because they don't want people to find the key because on the other side of it is a war crime. So like it's insane, but it kind of makes sense. And then I mean, barely, but like you suspend your disbelief, and then it felt like, I think honestly your Legend of Zelda comparison is really apt, because someone seized onto Resident Evil games have puzzles, and then they just,
it's in service to the brand.
Yeah, it was. It just, gotta have Resident Evil puzzles, and they just kept putting them in. Why?
Well, I mean, like it's the seminal example of this, and I say seminal because I think this is now the paramount example of this. Is BioShock, right? So in BioShock 1, you're in a post-apocalyptic underwater city, right? So what do? You loot through garbage cans, and you're, kind of like scavenging, right? Because it's the end of the world has happened, right? And then in BioShock Infinite, you're in a fully functioning society, and you're still rooting around in garbage. Like, that's weird now, because
there's like people around.
Yeah, exactly. Like if all of a sudden, it was a post-apocalyptic world, and, I was like, in a shelled out house, and like somebody went to the garbage and started like rummaging through it, I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe they're going to attack me, right? If I'm sitting on my couch, right, playing Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, right, and some guy walked up and started rooting around in my garbage, I would call the police, because that's a thing I can do, because the police still exist, So again, like if you have some eccentric weirdo in some eccentric mansion, and it's just kind of like, yeah, no, that makes sense, because he's one guy and one person. I do firmly believe that every human is exactly as crazy as they can afford to be, and people who live in mansions can afford to be really crazy, right? So he's got a bunch of money, and he's super paranoid and weird. So he built a bunch of weird puzzles because that's what he wanted to do with his money. It's like, I can get that, right? But then a city planner who said, no. You see, here's the thing, because I had to be pushed through committee, right? I mean, there's no way. There's just no way, So yeah, it definitely pulls you out of the idea of this narrative that they're trying to build. That you're like, what city? And for me personally, it gets to the point where you're like, no, Raccoon City deserves this.
Yeah, it's like, no wonder the Umbrella Corporation exists. Look at how crazy average citizens are.
Yeah, where you're just kind of like, this is the only logical conclusion to the story of this city. We're like, after the mayor apparently hired this bananas city planner, and the police decided like, no, we've got too many problems with Jim losing the dumb keys to the station, so we're going to use gems in a clock now. Like all of these bad decisions. I mean, of course, somebody eventually made the last bad decision, because that's all that this is it's just the last bad decision. And it happened to be zombie apocalypse. It could have very easily been sewage backup and a cholera outbreak. Like, something was going to biblically end this city, right? I mean, like in an awesome way. And I do mean that in the biblical way, which is to say terrifying.
I like that next on the possible list of things that destroyed Raccoon City was a cholera outbreak from a sewage system breakdown, because the actual name of the Resident Evil franchise in Japan, because this is a very Japanese series despite all of the Americanness, is Biohazard.
Yeah. It's got to be something. I mean, like, so being an environmental chemist, right? This is a slight aside. Is that not a lot of people do this thing, and I happen to be an expert in this very, very small area, right? But like literally, we used to get phone calls where people would be like, "Hey, I want to test my well water," and I'd say, "Oh, okay, that's fine. What do you want to test it for?" I want to see if it's safe to drink. And then my answer was always, well, there's lots of stuff that'll kill you. Which particular thing are you looking for? And it's like, well, I just need to make sure it's safe to drink. I'm like, let me break this down for you, man. Are you looking for like bacteria? Because that's something we can look for. Are you looking for like arsenic? Because that's something that we can look for. Are you looking for cyanide? Because that's something we can look for. All of these things will kill you in a very different way, but like it makes sense that it would be something infrastructure biology related, because that's kind of the stuff that's hardest to get under control, because life finds a way.
The one other thing I want to say about the puzzles is a lot of my frustration with this comes from the middle of the roadiness that they went with, which is, I mentioned like, oh, well, in the back half of the game, there's like knobs and levers and stuff. And that's like to work this complicated machinery. And to get between like the first area and the second area of the game, you have to like repair the train car. So you have to like find a fuse and you have to find a cable because like the machinery's broken, right? And it's like, it's a gating mechanic puzzle that makes you go and like scavenge the world and have to deal with zombies that you may have avoided the first time, right? So like I got why all these little stupid puzzle things exist. The fact that the writers, like one team of writers or one writer on the staff was like, okay, so this train car will be broken and you'll fix the train car and that's how you can get there. And this machine, like steam will be coming out of the pipes and you need to get down that hallway. So you got to like do the levers in the right order to get the steam to turn off so you can go down the hallway. And then one of the other writers was just like clocks and rubies and ruby clocks. It's like, okay, guys, here's what I need you to do. Either fire one of them or fire one of them. Like make all of the puzzles insane so that I start to go insane by having to think in the way that this insane world thinks, or make none of the puzzles insane so then I can focus on like the zombies and the evil, multi-billion-dollar corporation. But sometimes being like, oh, this broken down piece of machinery probably needs a battery, or it may need this bejeweled golden sparrow statue to be placed at just the right angle on top of this plinth. Those, I can't work both parts of those two parts of my brain at the same time.
So I have a counter theory for you, is that so let's just say that there was enough puzzles for two writers to write, right? So you got so your theory, two writers, one's insane and the other one sane, right?
Well, let's say one has a more liberal imagination and the other one is far more grounded in reality.
Yes. So counter theory is that many hours of work needed to be done, but they had one writer. So at the beginning, right, when he's first getting started, he's just kind of like, okay, these are the puzzles. This makes sense. Like you turn the levers and then like, at the end of development, like they open the door to his office, the lights are off. He's like hunched over his thing and it's just like papyrus everywhere now because he switched to papyrus because, that's how they get you. And, and he's just kind of like, no, you see, there's a clock and jewels and this is it. This is the next puzzle. And they're like, I don't ship it. I mean, Jim's in charge of the puzzles, Yeah.
Yeah, Jim, maybe take Monday off.
It's like,
you look a little conspiracy theorist.
No, the sparrow won't let me. But yeah, do you have anything else?
The only other thing I wanted to say is I kind of mentioned this when I shared my nostalgia experience, but I just like the inclusion of the mercenaries as the new game plus mechanic. I guess that's what you'd call it, right? It's like, because you have to beat the entire game on easy or hard. Then you can play the mercenaries, which is on the same map, but with different enemy placements. There's this timer mechanic. It's very video gamey, right? Because it's like, You have a time countdown. When the countdown goes off, there's a bomb in your neck and it explodes because your boss is a jerk. I'm not making this up. Like, your boss decides that you don't know how to really survive anymore. So he puts a bomb in your neck, and the way to get the bomb out is like on the other side of the map. So you got to deal with all these enemies. I'm totally serious. I'm completely serious. So it's really dumb.
This is the guy who made the puzzles.
Yeah, right. It's him. He just inserted himself wholesale into the game. You're totally right. But I like that they just, again, this actually is a perfect segue, because like they just lean into the insanity and the nonsense, right? And your reward for indulging in this insanity and nonsense is more insanity and nonsense. It's like, replay the game, but you start with a grenade launcher. Replay the game, but you start with the Magnum. Replay the game, but you start with a rocket launcher. Replay the game, but you start with the rocket launcher, and it has infinite ammo. Like, you can just really strip all of the horror out of the game and just make it completely ridiculous. And I'm really blown away by how well that Zelda parallel keeps lining up, because you can tell by their inclusion of that stuff is they were already starting to think more actiony, because they were like, what if we made it sillier? What if we made it sillier? What if we made it sillier? And they leaned into that really, really hard. And then they started to resort to jump scares, because it was still supposed to be a horror game. So you're an action superhero, but also jump scares, right? And that's where it started to go off. I think this exists at that little magical nexus of like, yeah, if you play it on hard and you don't do all the crazy new game plus stuff, like it is still kind of hard. It is still kind of scary. And especially if you don't know where all the jump scares and stuff are. But then if you play it on easy and you unlock all of the crazy stuff, then it's a total screw job. Like it's you're Wile E. Coyote out there chasing the Roadrunner. Like, it's nonsense.
So with all that being said, does it hold up?
I struggled with this one a little more than I expected. I ended up giving it a nostalgia monocle, and a pretty confident nostalgia monocle, because I would have a really hard time telling someone to suffer the nonsense here without like a bunch of asterisks and caveats, right? Like when we first sat down to play this, I think I recall saying like, don't feel that bad if you look up like a game facts on how to solve a puzzle, because some of the puzzles are completely nonsensical, right? Most of them you can kind of like, oh, okay, so this is an electrical thing, so I need an electrical thing. But like some of them are just stupid. They're just dumb. And so like it's
dumb.
It's hard to say like, well, deal with the terrible controls, deal with the terrible voice acting, deal with the ridiculous puzzles. It's a little tough to make that sell, but the visuals are surprisingly rock solid. The gameplay, despite the weird tank controls, is actually pretty fun, right? Puzzles notwithstanding, but like the exploring the world and surviving the world is actually pretty satisfying. And the game's not so long that you're like, oh my God, it's still happening. So like overall, I could recommend this to someone, but I would probably recommend it to someone who had played games of this era, who's like, they're familiar with kind of what the PlayStation was like, right? Even if they never played this game. But if somebody grew up with like the PS3 as like their first real console, it'd be really hard to tell them to go back and play this. The one sad footnote to this is apparently the reboot or the remake kind of sucks.
Ah, boo.
So the Resident Evil 1 remake is apparently really good. And the Resident Evil 2 remake is apparently really, really good. And then this one, I guess they just dropped the ball and they made some weird design choices that were not popular. So if you want to play Resident Evil 3, probably play this one, not the remake, but just know kind of what you're getting into.
Yeah, for me, also nostalgia monocle. The main reason why is, and it's difficult having like a 3-tiered system with the vast spectrum of games, you know, because like I at first I was frustrated. I was like, nostalgia goggles. And then I kind of thought about some of the games that this game would then be sharing company with.
I can't do that to this board game.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, no, that's not fair. Let's nostalgia monocle, because the game is playable, right? So I mean, just start right there, because we have played some games that are so broken that they're basically unplayable, you know? So the game's completely playable. It's just this game, because it straddles that weird line, there's a bunch of games that do everything this game tries to do better. you know? So like, it's like, do you want to play a zombie action game? Probably play later iterations of the Resident Evil series, or play Borderlands 3, Borderlands 2, right? I mean, actually, I think the Borderlands has a zombie DLC,
That's true.
So you just want to play like a wild action game with zombies where you're just blowing zombies' heads off. I mean, like that's, that particular type of cocaine, right? If you want to play a zombie horror game, for the love of God, play The Last of Us. If you haven't played The Last of Us, play The Last of Us, So if somebody's like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting into playing a zombie horror game, I'd be like, you played The Last of Us, right? They're like, no, I'm thinking like Resident Evil 3 for the PlayStation 1. I'd be like, no, I am legally obligated to stop you and tell you to play The Last of Us. It is just superior in every possible way. So that's why I kind of say nostalgia monocle. But the one big takeaway from me for this whole thing, right, is we need to play Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.